Imagine a footprint. Not in sand, where the next tide will wash it away. Not in mud, where the next rain will turn it to soup. Imagine a footprint in stone. It's a permanent mark. A moment from millions of years ago, frozen solid. That's what we have. In a place called Laetoli in Tanzania, there are footprints preserved in volcanic ash that turn to rock. They're about 3.6 million years old, and they have a story to tell. It's not a simple story. It's a story about who we are, where we came from, and one of the most important steps our ancestors ever took. Let's go back to the 1970s. The Leakey family was famous in paleoanthropology. Lewis and Mary Leakey had spent their lives in East Africa, searching for the origins of humanity. After Lewis's death, Mary continued their work. Her team was at Laetoli, a dry, remote site. Sure, they were looking for the usual things: fossilized bones, teeth, the hard parts of ancient animals that survived the ages. And they were finding them. They found ancient elephant tusks, giraffe jawbones, and the remains of many other creatures. But the big story wasn't the bones. The discovery of the footprints was an accident. A funny one at that. A couple of scientists on the team, Paul Abel and Andrew Hill, were amusing themselves by throwing dried elephant dung at each other. During this game, Hill ducked to avoid a piece of dung and fell. As he looked up from the ground, he saw something strange in the rock. It looked like a fossilized track, a footprint of some animal. This first track wasn't a hominin print, but it was enough. It made them look closer at the ground they were walking on. Mary Leakey was initially skeptical. Footprints are incredibly rare. The conditions had to be perfect for them to be preserved. But her team started to search. Carefully, they brushed away the surface dirt from a large slab of rock. And then they saw them. Trails of prints. Lots of them. There were tracks of ancient rabbits, guinea fowl, elephants, and strange three-toed horses. Laetoli was a snapshot of an entire ecosystem. And then, in 1978, a member of the team named Paul Abel found the one that changed everything. It was a hominin footprint, the footprint of a very, very old relative. It wasn't just one print. It was a trail. A long trail stretching for about 88 feet. And there wasn't just one individual. There were at least two, maybe three, walking together. The team spent weeks carefully excavating the site. They used dental picks and brushes to slowly reveal the tracks. It was delicate, nerve-wracking work. They were uncovering a single moment from the deep past, a moment when a few of our ancestors walked across a wet, ashy plain. What they found was stunning. The prints were so clear. You could see the shape of the foot. You could see the heel, you could see the arch, you could see the toes, you could even see how one individual seemed to pause and turn slightly before continuing on. This wasn't a bone. A bone tells you about anatomy, a footprint tells you about behavior. It tells you about life. It's the closest thing we have to a film clip from 3.6 million years ago. To understand why these footprints are so important, you have to understand the scene. What happened on that day? It wasn't just a normal day. A nearby volcano, probably one named Sadaman, had erupted, and it spewed a fine gray ash into the air. The ash fell across the landscape like a soft, gray snow. Then, a light rain began to fall. The rain mixed with the ash, turning it into a wet cement like mud. It was perfect for leaving impressions. After the rain stopped, a group of our ancestors walked across this fresh surface. We now know they were a species called Australopithecus afarensis. This is the same species as the famous Lucy skeleton, found a few years earlier in Ethiopia. The Lucy skeleton told us a lot about their bodies, but it couldn't tell us exactly how they moved. The footprints could. As these hominins walked, they left their prints in the soft, damp ash. They weren't alone. Other animals were out and about, also leaving their tracks. After they passed, the sun came out. The tropical sun beat down on the ash, baking it hard like pottery. It preserved the prints. Over time, more layers of ash and sediment covered the tracks, burying them, protecting them. They sat there, hidden underground, for millions of years. They waited while our own species evolved, while civilizations rose and fell. They waited until a couple of scientists started throwing elephant dung at each other, and one of them fell over. So, what does the footprint itself tell us? Everything. The first and most important thing is that these individuals were walking upright, on 2 feet. This is called bipedalism, and they were doing it in a way that was remarkably similar to how we walk today. Look at your own foot. When you walk, your heel hits the ground first. Then your weight rolls forward along the outside of your foot to the ball of your foot. You have a distinct arch in the middle of your foot that acts like a spring. Finally, you push off with your big toe, which is in line with all your other toes. This whole motion is very efficient. It allows us to walk and run for long distances. Now look at the foot of an ape, like a chimpanzee. Their foot is very different. It's much flatter, they don't have a pronounced arch like we do, and their big toe is separated from the other toes, almost like a thumb. It's a grasping toe. They can use their feet to hold onto branches. When a chimp walks on 2 feet, which they don't do very often, it's a clumsy waddling motion. They walk on the outside of their feet. Their big toe doesn't provide any push-off. Their foot is a tool for climbing. Our foot is a tool for walking. The Laetoli footprints show a foot that is much more like ours than an ape's. The prints have a clear heel strike. You can see the impression where the heel dug into the ash first. You can see the arch. The foot wasn't flat, and you can see the big toe was in line with the other toes. It wasn't splayed out to the side. Like, there's even a deep impression under, like, the big toe, showing, where it pushed off the ground to propel the body forward. This was a bombshell. Before the Laetoli footprints were found, many scientists had a different idea about human evolution. The prevailing theory was that our ancestors developed big brains first. The idea was that intelligence was the key driver of our evolution. Once we got smart, we figured out how to make tools, and once we had tools in our hands, we started walking on 2 feet to free up those hands. It was a neat story, big brains first, then tools, then bipedalism. The Laetoli footprints and the Lucy skeleton turned this idea on its head. Australopithecus afarensis had a small brain. Its brain was only about the size of a modern chimpanzee's. Yet, here was clear, undeniable proof that they walked upright, just like us. Bipedalism didn't come after big brains. It came long before. The way we move, the very foundation of our posture, is one of the oldest and most fundamental things that makes us human. We were walking on 2 feet long before we were thinking big thoughts. This raises a huge question. Why? Why did our ancestors start walking upright? There are many theories, and the truth is probably a combination of them. The traditional idea is called the savanna hypothesis. The climate in Africa was changing. Forests were shrinking, and grassy savannas were expanding. Walking on 2 feet would have been an advantage in this environment. You could see over the tall grass to spot predators or find food. Another idea is that it freed up the hands. Even before we were making complex stone tools, our hands would have been useful. We could carry food back to a home base. A mother could carry her infant. You could carry a stick or a rock for defense. You can't do any of that very easily if you're walking on your knuckles. There's also an energy efficiency argument. For traveling long distances, walking on 2 feet is more efficient than knuckle walking like a chimp or gorilla. As the forests broke up and food sources became more spread out, our ancestors would have had to travel farther each day. Bipedalism would have saved them precious calories. Another interesting idea has to do with staying cool. When you're standing upright, less of your body is exposed to the direct overhead sun. You also catch more of the cooling breezes that blow across the savanna. In the hot African climate, this could have been a major advantage, preventing the brain from overheating. Whatever the reason, or combination of reasons, the Laetoli footprints prove that by 3.6 million years ago, it wasn't a new experiment. It was a done deal. Our ancestors were committed bipeds. This was their primary way of getting around. They still had some features for climbing. Lucy's skeleton shows she had long arms and curved finger bones, suggesting she might have still spent time in trees, perhaps to sleep or escape from predators. But on the ground she walked. The footprints tell us more than just how they walked. They give us a glimpse into their social lives. The main trackway, known as Trail G, shows 2 individuals walking side by side. One set of prints is larger than the other. It's very likely this was a male and a female. Australopithecus afarensis showed a lot of sexual dimorphism, meaning males were significantly larger than females. This fits with the fossil evidence. So, we have a male and a female walking together. What's even more fascinating is that there appears to be a third, smaller set of tracks. These prints are found inside the tracks of the larger individual. It looks like a small child was walking behind the adult, carefully stepping in their footprints. It's an image that is deeply relatable. A family walking together, a child following a parent. Of course, we have to be careful. We can't know for sure that this was a nuclear family in the modern sense. It could have been any group of individuals. Maybe the smaller individual wasn't a child, but just a smaller female. And maybe they weren't walking together at the same time, but just minutes apart along the same path. But the simplest explanation is often the most likely. The image of 2 adults and a child walking across a plain is a powerful one. It suggests social bonds, it suggests cooperation, it suggests a group structure that was more complex than we might have imagined. It humanizes them. They weren't just ape men, they were beings with social lives, moving through their world together. The footprints also give us clues about their size and gait. By measuring the length of the prints and the distance between them, the stride length, scientists can estimate how tall these individuals were and how fast they were walking. The estimates suggest the larger individual was around 4 feet 9 inches tall, and the smaller one was around 4 feet tall. They weren't walking fast. It was a slow, unhurried stroll, a pace you might take if you were just going about your day, not running from a predator or rushing towards a food source. It was a moment of normal life, and they weren't the only ones living a normal life that day. The other animal tracks found at Laetoli are just as important for understanding their world. They paint a picture of the environment. The presence of guinea fowl suggests there were patches of scrub or woodland nearby. The tracks of ancient giraffes, rhinos, and elephants tell us this was a classic African savanna teeming with big game. There were also predators. The tracks of a type of hyena and a saber-toothed cat have also been identified. This context is crucial. Our ancestors weren't at the top of the food chain. They were small, relatively slow, and didn't have big teeth or claws. They were living in a dangerous world. Walking upright might have helped them see danger coming, but they were still vulnerable. They were just one part of a complex and competitive ecosystem. The footprints show them walking through this world, sharing it with a whole host of other creatures. They were a part of nature, not separate from it. The journey of walking on 2 feet, confirmed so beautifully by the Laetoli prints, also came with a cost. It was a massive evolutionary trade-off. Our bodies were re-engineered for an upright stance, and we are still living with the consequences. Think about the spine. An ape's spine is a simple, arched bridge, supported at 4 corners. Our spine is a vertical, S-shaped column trying to balance a heavy head on top of a mobile pelvis. The result? Back pain. Slipped discs, sciatica, and chronic lower back problems are the price we pay for our posture. Our feet, too, pay a price. They are marvels of engineering, but they take a pounding every single day. The arch that is so clear in the Laetoli prints can fall. Plantar fasciitis, bunions, and stress fractures are all common ailments. We've traded a grasping, versatile foot for one that is specialized for a single task. Perhaps the biggest trade-off is related to childbirth. To walk upright efficiently, we need a narrow pelvis. But as our brains started to get bigger, much later in our evolutionary story, this created a conflict. We needed to push a large-brained baby through a narrow birth canal. This is known as the obstetric dilemma. It's why human childbirth is so much more difficult and dangerous than for any other primate. That family strolling through the ash at Laetoli didn't have this problem. Their brains, and thus their babies' heads, were still small. But the pelvic structure that their bipedalism required set the stage for this future conflict. The very adaptation that was so successful for them created a major challenge for their descendants, including us. So when we look at that 3.6 million year old footprint, we are looking at the start of a journey. A journey that led to us, with all our strengths and weaknesses. It's a journey that led to back pain and difficult childbirth, but also to hands that could create art, build cities, and write symphonies. It's all connected. After their discovery, the Laetoli tracks were carefully documented. Plaster casts were made. They were mapped and photographed from every angle. Then, to protect them from the elements, they were reburied under a protective layer of sand and soil. It was the best way to preserve them. But out of sight is not a perfect solution. Over the years, there have been concerns about damage from growing tree roots and other environmental factors. Today, the science of studying these prints has advanced in ways Mary Leakey could have only dreamed of. And scientists can now use 3D laser scanning and photogrammetry to create incredibly detailed digital models of the tracks. This allows them to study the prints without ever touching the fragile originals. They can analyze the subtle pressures and movements in ways that were impossible before. They can run computer simulations to test how different foot structures would produce different kinds of prints, confirming that the Laetoli hominins walked in a way that was fundamentally modern. In 2015, new footprints were discovered at a nearby site, just 150 meters away from the original trails. These new tracks were made by 2 more individuals, one of whom was unusually large. This big male was estimated to be about 5 feet 5 inches tall. This was a surprise. It expanded the known size range for Australopithecus afarensis males. It suggests their social groups might have been structured more like gorillas, with a single dominant, large male and a group of smaller females. Again, it's speculation, but it's informed by the evidence in the rock. Each new print adds another piece to the puzzle. What then can a 3 million year old footprint really tell us? It can tell us that our ancestors stood up and walked tall long before their brains grew large. It can tell us that the foundation of our humanity is not our intellect, but our posture. It tells us that this pivotal step was taken not in isolation, but in a world full of other creatures, big and small. It can give us a glimpse of a social world, a world of individuals walking together, perhaps as a family, across a changing landscape. It shows us a moment of quiet, everyday life from a time so remote it's hard to even comprehend. It also connects us directly to that past. The mechanics of your own footsteps as you walk down the street today are an echo of that walk across the volcanic ash. The heel strike, the arch, the push off from the big toe, it's a legacy, a 3.6 million year old legacy. We are the descendants of those who took that walk. The footprint is more than just a piece of evidence. It's a symbol. It's a reminder that our evolutionary story is not a simple cartoon of an ape slowly standing up and turning into a man. It's a complex, messy, and fascinating story with twists and turns. It's a story of adaptations and trade-offs. Bipedalism was a huge success, but it came with costs we still bear. Ultimately, that simple depression in the rock is a profound connection to our deep past. It's a human story. It's a story of a journey that began with a single step, preserved by chance in the ash of an ancient volcano. And by studying it, we learn not just about a long extinct hominin, we learn about ourselves.